If you've been moving through your days with a strange numbness, like the color drained out of your life after a breakup, a big change, or a quiet identity collapse, I need you to hear this clearly. You're not losing yourself. You're in a corridor between versions of you. It feels like nothing makes sense because the old timeline is dissolving and the new one hasn't fully formed yet. That in-between space can feel like loneliness, anxiety, even a kind of spiritual homesickness you can't explain to anyone. And the hardest part is that people around you may think you're fine, while inside, you feel like you're floating without a map. But what if the emptiness isn't punishment, and it isn't failure? What if it's actually the universe creating silence on purpose? So you can finally hear the signal you've been missing. Because there's one uncomfortable truth about awakening that almost no one tells you. The void is not a dead end. It's a recalibration chamber, and if you interpret it the wrong way, you'll try to escape it and accidentally rebuild the same life you just outgrew. Stay with me until the end, because in the last part of this video, I'm going to show you the clearest sign that you're not stuck. You're being redirected into a new timeline and how to align with it without forcing anything. This phase feels empty for a reason, because something in you has stopped pretending. The old identity that used to hold everything together is quietly losing its grip, and what remains is raw space, unfurnished, unfiltered, and honest. Maybe it started after a relationship ended. Maybe after you moved, changed paths, or suddenly couldn't recognize yourself in the mirror of your own routines. One day, you're functioning, and the next, you feel like you're walking through life slightly out of sync, as if you don't belong to the old world anymore, but you haven't arrived in the new one. Psychology has a name for this kind of in-between threshold, a liminal phase, an ambiguous period where you're no longer who you were, but not yet fully who you're becoming. Some frameworks also describe it as a neutral zone, where uncertainty rises because the mind craves predictability and closure, even when closure is painful. And when you're sensitive, when you're the kind of person who feels energy, reads signs, notices patterns, this space can feel even louder. You start seeing synchronicities that don't let you sleep. You feel intuition tugging at you at the strangest times. You sense that something greater is guiding you, but you can't explain it in a way that satisfies the logical part of you. How many times have you felt the universe trying to tell you something, but you couldn't translate the message? How many times have you asked, "What is wrong with me?" when the deeper question is actually, "What is waking up in me?" This channel exists for that exact moment, the moment where science, energy, and consciousness meet, not to give you shallow answers, but to help you name what you're living. And in this video, you're going to understand why the emptiness is not a void to escape. It's a doorway you were meant to walk through. What you're feeling right now isn't just sadness. It's not just missing someone. It's not even only fear of the future. It's a deeper kind of displacement, because when a relationship ends or a life chapter collapses, something else breaks quietly with it. The identity that was built around that chapter. The version of you who knew what to expect. The version of you who could explain your life in one simple sentence. And when that sentence disappears, the mind calls it emptiness, but your soul calls it space. In ancient human language, there is a concept that describes this perfectly. Liminality, an in-between threshold where you are no longer who you were, but not yet fully who you are becoming. It's described as a stage of ambiguity and disorientation, like standing at a doorway with one foot in the past and one foot in the unknown. And this is why the void feels so strange. It's not a normal kind of pain. It's a different atmosphere. Maybe you wake up and everything looks the same, but nothing feels the same. Maybe you scroll through your phone and nothing lands. Maybe you talk to people and you can smile, you can answer, you can function, but inside you feel far away. as if your spirit is sitting 1 inch behind your body, watching your life like a movie you no longer recognize. That doesn't mean you're broken. It can mean the old structure of who you had to be is dissolving, because it can't follow you into the next version of your life. Here's the part most people don't understand. The emptiness is not always absence. Sometimes it's detachment. It's the moment when your inner system stops feeding energy into what's no longer true. And yes, it can feel like grief, because you're not only grieving a person, you're grieving a timeline. You're grieving the future you rehearsed in your mind, the small rituals, the imagined stability, the identity you wore without realizing it was a costume. So if you've been judging yourself, why am I like this? Why can't I move on faster? Listen carefully. In many transitions, the middle phase is intense precisely because it holds two worlds at once. The world you outgrew and the world you haven't embodied yet. And that creates an inner conflict that feels like fog, because your mind wants certainty while your deeper intelligence is rewriting the map. This is why you may crave answers that no religion gave you and no shallow self-help could touch. Because what's happening isn't just getting over it, it's identity changing shape. It's you disengaging from a central self-definition, while exploring possible versions of you that still feel unreal, like distant stars you can't reach yet. And in this liminal space, everything becomes symbolic. Songs hit harder, dreams become louder, synchronicities start appearing like gentle taps on the shoulder. You might see repeating numbers. You might run into a name that reminds you of the past. You might feel pulled toward a book, a place, a new interest you never cared about before. These aren't random when you're in a threshold season. They're how the universe speaks when your old language collapses. But there's a danger here, an easy trap. When the emptiness arrives, most people try to fill it immediately. Another relationship, another identity, another distraction, another label, another plan. Not because they're weak, because the ego fears open space. Open space means something new can enter, and something new means you can't control the outcome. So the mind tries to rebuild the old world with different furniture. And this is exactly how you repeat cycles. So let this question land softly in you. What if the emptiness is protecting you from choosing too quickly? What if the silence is not neglect, but precision? Like a cosmic pause between breaths, like a reset in the system where the old timeline loses power, so the new timeline can finally find you. In the next block, the conversation goes deeper into the quantum perspective, timelines, parallel realities, and the strange way your future self can pull you forward before you even understand where you're going. There's a reason this empty phase feels like standing in a hallway with doors on both sides. Because when the old version of you dissolves, you start sensing something the rational mind doesn't like to admit. There are multiple possible yous trying to emerge at the same time. Physics has a concept that helps us imagine this, even if your life isn't literally a laboratory. In quantum theory, a system can be described as existing in a superposition, more than one possibility at once, until a measurement interaction forces a single outcome in the description. And there's even an interpretation of quantum mechanics, many worlds, that suggests all outcomes exist, branching into non-communicating worlds like diverging timelines. Now bring this down to the level of the heart, not as a claim that atoms are controlling your breakup, but as a mirror for what consciousness feels like during transformation. Because right now you can feel the branches. One version of you wants to run back to what was familiar, even if it was slowly draining you. Another version of you wants to disappear for a while, so no one can ask questions you can't answer. And another version of you, a quieter one, is starting to breathe differently. That version doesn't want to repeat the old cycle. It doesn't want to beg for crumbs of attention. It doesn't want to live a life that looks stable on the outside, but feels misaligned on the inside. People hear wave function collapse and think it means your awareness magically forces reality to obey you. But in physics, collapse is a way of describing how a superposition reduces to a single outcome in a measurement, and what that means depends on interpretation. And here's where the spiritual insight becomes gentle but sharp. In your human life, the collapse often happens when you stop negotiating with your own soul, when you choose truth over attachment, when you stop asking, "How do I get them back?" and start asking, "Why did I abandon myself to keep them?" That's a measurement, that's an interaction, that's a moment where the universe doesn't punish you, it reveals you. If there are many possible futures, then your higher self isn't a person in the clouds judging you. It's the most coherent signal of you, the version of you that already learned the lesson, so it doesn't need the suffering to repeat. And this is why synchronicities spike during the void, because when the external world goes quiet, the inner signal gets louder. Maybe you've noticed it. You're not even trying, and you keep seeing the same themes: new beginnings, release, alignment, choose yourself. You hear a line in a song that feels like it was written for you. You meet someone by coincidence who says one sentence, and your whole nervous system responds like, "Yes, that's it." That's not you being dramatic. That's you becoming sensitive to direction again. But there's one mistake that can trap you in the in-between, even when the new timeline is already approaching. And it's so subtle that it disguises itself as spirituality. In the next block, it will be revealed, along with the simplest way to align with the version of you that's already awake, without forcing outcomes or chasing signs. Here is the mistake that traps people in this empty phase. Even when the new timeline is already open, you keep asking for a sign, when the sign is asking for you. You keep waiting for the universe to make it obvious, undeniable, loud, because then you wouldn't have to risk anything. You wouldn't have to choose. You wouldn't have to let go. You wouldn't have to grieve the last thread of the old self. So you hover, half detached from the past, but still energetically feeding it. And that hovering has a cost, not because the universe is punishing you, but because your nervous system cannot fully settle into the new chapter while you keep one hand on the old door handle. After a breakup, many people experience reduced self-concept clarity. Basically, the sense of "who am I" becomes less clear, and that confusion can intensify emotional distress. So when you feel like you don't know yourself anymore, it's not proof that you're failing. Sometimes it's a known part of the identity transition. In the quiet moments, when there's no distraction, the mind tends to turn inward and narrate the self. What did I do wrong? What does this mean? What if I ruined everything? That kind of self-referential mental activity is often linked to the brain's default mode network, which is active during rest and self-focused thinking. And if you're spiritually sensitive, the mind can dress rumination in sacred clothing. You call it intuition, but it's really a loop. You call it a message, but it's really fear trying to regain control. You call it manifestation, but it's really attachment begging for certainty. This is why the void can feel exhausting, not because nothing is happening, but because too much of your energy is leaking into mental rehearsal. Now listen closely, because this is where many teachings become dangerous if misunderstood. Surrender is not pretending you don't feel. Surrender is not being fine. And surrender is not distracting yourself until you're numb. Avoidance may give temporary relief, but it can reinforce emotional disconnection and numbness over time. It can look like overworking, overscrolling, jumping into someone new, staying busy so you never have to sit with the truth that your life is changing. Surrender is different. Surrender is staying present while reality reorganizes. It's letting the emotions move without letting them drive the steering wheel. It's allowing the identity to dissolve without rushing to replace it. Alignment is not a giant decision. It's not a dramatic announcement. It's a series of small, almost invisible loyalties. A new timeline doesn't begin when the universe gives you fireworks. It begins when you stop abandoning yourself in private. When you choose one honest act over one familiar lie. Here are 3 quiet ways to align. Today, without forcing anything, choose one truth you will no longer negotiate with. If it hurt you, if it shrank you, if it required you to betray yourself, you don't call it love anymore. Protect one pocket of silence each day, not to figure it all out, but to let your system reset so you can hear what's real beneath the noise of rumination. Take one action that matches the future version of you, not to prove anything, just to signal coherence. A walk, a journal page, a boundary, one small step that says, I'm moving. The new you doesn't arrive like a miracle. The new you arrives like a decision you finally stop undoing. And in the next block, there's a simple guided practice you can do today, something you can return to whenever the emptiness comes back, so the void becomes a sanctuary instead of a threat. This in-between is not a sign that you're failing. It's a threshold where the old identity loosens and a new one begins to organize. After a breakup or major life shift, it's common to feel like your sense of self got blurry, because part of your identity was built around a shared story. So today, instead of breathing exercises or guided meditation, you're going to do something more grounded. You're going to translate the void. Step 1, the void inventory, 5 minutes on paper. Open a notes app or a notebook and write 3 short columns. What ended, facts only. What is dissolving in me, patterns, roles, versions of you. What is trying to be born, even if it's vague. Keep it simple, 1 line per item, because emptiness becomes overwhelming when it stays unnamed. The moment you put language on it, it stops being a monster and starts becoming a map. Step 2, facts versus spell. Breaking the old timeline trance. Now write 2 lines, the fact, this chapter ended, the spell, and that means I'm unlovable, late, behind, broken. Read the second line again and notice, it doesn't feel like truth. It feels like hypnosis. That spell is the old timeline trying to pull you back, using fear as gravity. Then write a 3rd line, slowly. The release. It ended, and I am still here. I am still becoming. This is how you stop confusing pain with prophecy. Step 3, the 1-2 alignment. 1 boundary plus 1 invitation. Choose just 2 small moves for the next 24 hours. 1 boundary, 1 thing you will not feed anymore. Checking, chasing, proving, reopening a wound, rereading the past. 1 invitation, 1 thing you will feed instead. A walk somewhere new. A message to a friend who feels safe. Cleaning 1 corner of your space. Applying for the thing you keep postponing. This isn't productivity. It's energetic honesty. A boundary tells the universe that timeline is closed. An invitation tells the universe I'm available for the next one. Step 4, the synchronicity anchor. Turn signs into direction. Tonight, write down 3 synchronicities you noticed recently. Anything that felt like a tap on the shoulder. Next to each one, answer only this. What emotion did this awaken in me? Because the point of synchronicity isn't entertainment, it's orientation. And your emotion is the compass, showing where your higher self is trying to bring you back into coherence. If this phase feels empty, it may be because life is removing the noise that kept you small. The void is not here to punish you. It's here to make you honest, so the next version of you can finally feel like home. The final sign you're being redirected into a new timeline isn't a sudden miracle. It's a quiet refusal inside you. The moment you can't fully go back, not because you're stronger, but because your soul no longer fits inside the old shape. What used to numb you stops working. What used to excite you feels hollow, and what used to be normal starts to feel like a lie you can't comfortably repeat. This is the threshold, the liminal space, where you're no longer who you were, but not yet fully who you're becoming. And if this began after a breakup, that identity blur is not imagined. Research has found that people often experience reduced self-concept clarity after romantic breakups, and that reduction is linked with emotional distress. So here is the message you were meant to receive if you stayed until now. The emptiness is not proof that nothing is happening. It's proof that something false stopped being fed. Don't chase signs. Become the sign. Choose one truth you won't abandon, and let that be your new compass. When you stay loyal to what's real, reality reorganizes around you. If this video touched something deep in you, subscribe to this channel. This portal exists for the ones walking through the in-between, when nobody else understands what's happening inside you. And write in the comments, "I choose myself." Or share one synchronicity you've been seeing lately, because naming it anchors your new timeline. And when the next video appears on the end screen, click it so you don't walk back into the old corridor alone when the night gets quiet.